Welcome to the webinar, the Worldwide Waste webinar from Let's Do It World. Thank you so much for coming, all the people who are here, all the people who are still coming in, and all the people who are joining us now on social media on Facebook and different platforms. And thank you, Martin, as usual, who is the whiz behind all the streaming. So thank you. And it's great to be here to talk about this issue that we've touched on a few times on the World Cleanup Day and at the World Cleanup Conference, the Let's Do It World Conference. It is digital waste and the real impact it has on the environment, because of course it's something that most of us think that there isn't much correlation or overlap between the online digital world and the real physical world around us. And it's still a concept that I find difficult to get my head around, how the files stored in our email, in our drive, anywhere we have a digital footprint, that they're actually contributing to CO2 emissions around the world. So I'm not going to blab on because it's not my area of expertise. I'm your curious host. My name is Colm Flynn. It's great to see some of you again, some new faces here too. And I'm sitting here in Rome beside the Vatican talking to you. So we have the backing of Pope Francis, which is always good. And of course, Pope Francis, one of his big things of his papacy since the very beginning has always been the environment. His first big encyclical, which is a big teaching from the Pope to all Catholics around the world, was that Catholics have a responsibility to look after the environment. So I'm doing my part on behalf of the Catholic Church, being here as well. But we're going to start with Gerry McGovern, who's an Irish man like me. So it's great to keep it all Irish today. This is like a mini St. Patrick's Day. He's in Dublin. Gerry, how are you?
I'm very good, Colm, and thanks for inviting me here.
It's sunny here in Rome. What's it like in beautiful dear old Dublin?
It's sunny in Gormanston, in north of Dublin at the moment, which is quite rare because it's been very cold and wet and windy for most of this year.
And this is an area, you're an author, you're an activist, you've written a book on this very issue. When did you become so passionate about this cause and why?
Sorry, Colm, I lost you there, the last thing you just said.
I was just saying, when did you become so passionate about this issue and what got you passionate about it?
It's not that long ago, Colm, maybe 3 years ago or so that I became aware of it and the challenges that, I've been involved in the web industry since the beginning, since the 90s. And it's only about 3 years ago that I really began to be aware of the carbon footprint of digital.
And before we get into your presentation and your slides, I just want to mention that if anyone has questions at the end of the presentation, we'll be putting it out to the floor so you can ask a question straight to Gerry and our other two talkers who are coming up after Gerry. So Gerry, if you want to get going then, and you can tell us about why this is such a pressing issue and the real impact on the environment that digital waste has. And look at this, like magic, his presentation is opening up.
Good. So, okay, let's get into it. Basically, every year we create about 54 million tons of e-waste. So that's the equivalent, all of commercial aircraft ever built comes to about 40 million tons. 54 million tons of e-waste is like dumping 1,000 laptops every second. And less than 20% of e-waste is recycled. And much of the recycling is actually the rich world dumping in poor world, where it's recycled in so-called in open pits to get out the precious metals. So we've got a massive problem of the actual digital device world. It's expected to grow to about 100 million tons or more in the next 30 years or so. And the pandemic has had a big impact on it as well. A lot more electrical e-waste and computers and desktops that are not being used in offices that people are not getting back to. So this is a huge hidden area that many people are not aware of, that most of the waste is in the device. So in a typical smartphone, a smartphone will take about 60 kgs of CO2. It'll create 60 kgs of CO2 in its manufacture. Using it for a year will be about 5 kgs. So there's far more waste in the actual manufacture of the device than there is in the actual consumption or usage of the device. But what we have behind it as well, driving the purchase of these devices, is an absolute explosion in data. We are now into zettabytes of data. And in 2035, they estimate we'll have over 2,000 zettabytes of data. So I want to give you a sense of what a zettabyte of data is. If we were to print out 1 zettabyte of data, that would take 20 trillion trees. 20 trillion trees. Now that's 6 times more trees than are currently on the entire planet. So just 1 zettabyte of data, you'd have to have 20 trillion trees to print out all the data that is contained in a zettabyte. And by 2035, we're estimated we'll have over 2,000 zettabytes. We have created more data in the last 2 years than in all of previous civilization. So there's an absolute explosion in creation of things, whether it's digital photographs or videos or all sorts of content in data. 90% of this data is not used 3 months after it is created. So in other words, 90% of the data we create is crap. 90% of the data we create is immediate rubbish. It has no value. It never gets used. So we create, it's like all the photos we take that we never go back to. Well, that's happening through billions and billions and billions of activities today. There's this massive data. There's about 1.8 billion websites on this planet, right? So a website for basically every 3 people on the planet. And 91% of content never gets visited from Google. So 91% of these websites and 91% of the pages, nobody ever, it's never indexed, it's never visited. So we're creating all this stuff that has no use, but it's consuming energy and it's creating waste. Apps. Most apps are rubbish. They never get used. 95% of apps are not used 90 days after they're downloaded. So in the digital world, we are addicts of creation and we create things without thinking. And we think, oh, it's only it's only a megabyte or blah, 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 but it all begins to add up. So we're this addiction of creation of generally useless data that is creating more and more demands on energy as it needs to be stored in the cloud or wherever. Somebody was saying in the feedback of what they'd like to learn about, they heard, you know, what's the difference between posting a letter and sending an email? Isn't it better to send an email? Well, it is better to send an email than to post a letter. Definitely, there's definitely more CO2 associated with posting a letter. Every year we post about 250 billion letters. But how many emails do we send? We send 300 billion emails every day. We send 300 billion emails every day. And people says, oh, email's dead. Nobody uses email. Email's growing by about 30 billion emails a year, so-called dead. You know, all these new devices, whether it's Slack or whatever, come along, but they don't replace the old ones. They just create more and more junk in parallel with the old ones. You'd have to plant 1.6 billion trees just to deal with email spam. Every year, just to deal with email spam, you'd have to plant 1.6 billion trees. Other areas where digital has a very negative impact on the environment. Oh, we all say, oh, it's better, e-commerce, it's better than commerce. I'm not driving to the shops or whatever, but there's a lot of hidden problems with e-commerce. We are returning at least 3 times the rate for e-commerce than with traditional commerce. And with clothes, we return an average somewhere between 30 and 40% of clothes that are bought online are returned. In fact, there are habits where people deliberately buy 5 or 6, you know, shoes or jeans or whatever with the deliberate intention of returning most of them in the process. And returns are creating a massive problem for waste because a lot of these clothes cannot be resold, etc. So billions and billions and billions of euros and dollars in lost inventory, etc., because of the bad habits we're picking up because of digital convenience and e-commerce. We all want our same-day delivery. it's twice as polluting to get same-day delivery as it is to get normal delivery. So why is that? Why is that? Because the truck is generally less full. There's generally faster driving because they're trying desperately to get this thing to you as quickly as possible. Drivers more stressed. You need to have larger stock levels. And certainly if you're delivering food, you're going to have greater food waste because you need a bigger inventory if you've got a shorter time frame to deliver something. So all of this convenience has a cost, and it's often a hidden cost that is the earth. So it's not just the digital world itself, it's not just the devices, it's not just the data, it's the bad habits that digital creates within the population. The sense of everything is disposable and everything should be at my fingertips and I should be able to get everything now because that's what the digital marketers tell us. We can all have it now. Well, the faster you get it, the bigger the impact, negative impact on the planet. So here's a few little tips or things to do to not be so bad, to have a lower footprint in the digital environment. Think about the energy consumption of the device that you're using. Basically, the bigger the device, the more consumption. So use a laptop instead of a desktop. Even better, use a smartphone. Look for the lowest spec. Why do we always buy high spec things? Ask, how much do I actually need? Because often we buy bigger machines than we actually need. Look for good energy ratings when you're buying. Keep it as long as possible. It's extremely important to keep stuff as long as possible because so much of the waste occurs in the manufacturing process. You need to keep it a long time to basically deal with that waste over time. Don't use large screens. You know, work on your laptop. Don't have a separate screen if you can avoid it. Reduce monitor brightness. Do not use things like screensavers. They're energy hunks. Turn off your monitor after 5 minutes. Sleep after 10 minutes. Shut down when you're not using. Shut down things at night. It's really important to shut down things and shut down as much electronics as possible. They did a study in the United States where they found that an average of 20% of a typical home electricity bill is from vampire power. And what vampire power is, electronic devices that are on but are not being used, but they're sucking power, right? So switch everything off that you can at night. Turn stuff off. So a desktop computer, if you're not using it, it's still, a desktop computer typically is consuming about 200 watts an hour. Right. If you're not using it, it's still consuming 100 watts. So if it's on, but you're not using it, it's consuming 100 watts. At 50% utilization, it's 180. At 100% utilization, it's 200 watts an hour. So if that thing is not in use, switch it off. If millions of us could do that, we'd save significant quantities of energy. So a few tips around smartphones. Minimize notifications, will have less draw and less stress and energy. Disable location services when you can. Remove unused apps so they won't constantly be updating and transferring data. Think hard before downloading new apps. Watch out for greedy apps. Some apps like Facebook are tremendously intensive on the battery, etc. So not all apps have the same energy footprint in their usage. Keep battery level above 50%. Generally, it's better than allowing it to go dead for maximum life of the battery. Short charges tend to be better. Don't leave it plugged in at full charge. Plug it out. Don't drain your battery completely. Use a wire to charge. I'll show you why in a moment. Remove when charged and plug out your charger. Even your charger is draining a little bit of electricity, even when it's not being used to charge your phone. Dim the screen if you can, use dark mode, and stream in standard definition. The difference between standard definition video and high definition video is very significant, as I'll show you in a few moments. And don't expose your phone to a lot of heat that damages the battery, having it in sunlight, etc. So these are just some tips. I'll be sending on this presentation and can be circulated around as well. But the number one thing is hold on to your device as long as possible. This was a study of the water footprint and the carbon footprint of phones. And it basically shows that if you keep a phone for 5 years, you have the water footprint, its water impact in relation to its manufacture. And you essentially have its carbon footprint as well. So keeping a device is the single most important thing you can do. If you keep it for 1 extra year or 2 extra years, that significantly reduces the overall CO2 impact in the digital universe. So looking here in relation to making calls, the old phone, nobody on this call I'm sure remembers the old phone. Well, the old phone was much more environmental than any of our new technologies. To make a 1-hour call on that old landline phone with the wires and all that stuff would create about 3.6 megabyte of data. To make the same call using Skype or something like that, VoIP as it's called, creates about 27 megabytes of data. To use it over a standard video conference is about 270 megabytes of data. Over high definition, about 540. If you go to 4K, it's 9 gigabytes an hour. If you go to 8K, it's 36 gigabytes. And basically, the heavier, the more data you create, the more energy is consumed in a specific process. So having a 1-hour call using 8K video creates 10,000 times more pollution than having an analog call, right? And they call it progress. They call this progress. This is a con so much in digital. So here, what's the most efficient way to communicate other than two humans talking to each other, which we should do more of hopefully after this pandemic? Well, the most energy efficient way to communicate is an SMS. It requires the least energy to transmit a message through NMS. So if you said something like, thank you very much, and you sent it by SMS, let's say you create 1 unit of CO2 in creating that. If you send the exact same email, you'll create 285 times more. If you say it by audio, you ring the person up and say, I just rang to say thank you very much for your message. Bye. That would be 7,000 times more. If you say it by standard video, hi, I'm just calling to say thank you very much for your message, that's 53,000 times more. And if you did it by high definition video, it's 81,000 times more. So there's certain ways we can choose that are much more efficient at communication than others. Online meetings. I know we're using it, but basically audio is 10% of video. So some tips as a general thing, if you're not presenting, so to speak, if video to greet for the first 5 minutes, but then go to audio. You'll save 90% on pollution. You'll reduce the impact of that meeting by 90% if you go to audio instead of to video. And also, it's much less stressful for most people. There's loads of studies coming out now that it's not healthy for us to be either seeing ourselves or constantly staring at people on screens. Use lowest resolution possible in your video format. Use the smallest screens possible. Don't save meetings unless absolutely essential. Delete saved meetings after 3 months. And don't attend meetings unless it's genuinely important. So these are some tips for online meeting reduction. If you're transferring data, most people don't know about this either. Wired is actually the most efficient way to transfer data. So that Ethernet cable, that cable that's going into some of your computers or otherwise. So transferring an hour worth of video streaming using fiber optic cable creates about 2 grams of CO2 per hour. If you use copper cable, it's about 4 grams of CO2 per hour. If you use 3G, it's 90 grams. 3G, 4G, and 5G are absolutely horrible when it comes to CO2. Basically, Wi-Fi is twice as polluting as wired, but 3G is, 45, 90 times more, and 5G is 100 times, 200 times more. So if you're transferring particularly large quantities of data, try and use a wire. And if you're at home, always make sure you're on Wi-Fi, not on your 3G network. It's much more energy intensive to transfer data using the mobile networks than it is to transfer using your Wi-Fi. these things, I bought one of these things. Oh, this is cool. I'll basically, this is how I'm going to charge my phone from now on. Charging it, because this is essentially a Wi-Fi device in essence that you're putting it on. Charging your phone using this device rather than plugging it in to your charger, this will take 47% more energy per charge. So use a wire where possible. It seems counterintuitive, but it's the most energy sensitive way of dealing with a lot of things. Storage. Think about your storage. If you've got loads of stuff that you know you're not going to look at for a long time, then the solution should be archival storage, not the type of Dropbox instantly on storage. By choosing the right type of storage, you could create 150 times less pollution. And if you really want the most environmentally friendly storage, you store it to your computer, to a local disk. Storing to the cloud versus to a local disk is something like 3,000 times more efficient. Basically, the more it has to travel, the more energy it's going to consume and the more waste it's going to actually create. So archival storage, there are different types of storage: archived, cool storage, hot storage, and premium storage. Premium storage is essentially Dropbox or most of these things that we pay for on a monthly basis. If we're not using a lot of data, store it in an archive. We're saving energy and you'll save money. It's much, much cheaper archival backup than it is premium instant on backup. Websites. If some of you are connected with websites and building websites today are a disgrace. This is my job. This is what I've been building websites since 1994. And that's a long, long, long time, right? It's 2005, a typical website was about 400 kilobytes. Then it went to 700. Then it went to 2 megabytes by 2015. And depending on the metrics you look at, it's now about 4 megabytes. And most of this is crap. Most of this is crap code, crap JavaScript, crap CSS, just bad, lazy development and bad, lazy programming. Our websites are incredibly obese and they're causing major impacts on the environment and also people's ability to use them. So I'm going to give you just a little example. If I thought I was doing a good job with my own website, Customer Care Words, where I do my work through. Then I said, I'm going to try and make it better, because it was about a megabyte. So in actual weight at the homepage. But I said, I'm going to really work with my developer and designer now and really work it better. So we created what we think is a much better website. It doesn't look different at all. It's the exact same visual website, right? So there's no change in the content, no change in the graphics, except that this one on the left was 957 kilobytes, and this one here is 70. How did we get from 957 kilobytes to 70 in weight? Because obviously the impact of that, every kilobyte, everything in data and weight creates a tiny amount of energy, consumes a tiny amount of energy, and consumes waste. So if you're thinking about digital, think about weight and think about waste in the process. So the old website, 957, JavaScript. The old website had JavaScript. When we looked at it, we didn't need JavaScript. Most websites don't need JavaScript, and we designed it in a way that we didn't need JavaScript. So instead of every page downloading 405 kilobytes of JavaScript, we now download 0 JavaScript. The CSS file was totally bloated. The CSS is for the layout of the actual page. It was coming in at 422 kilobytes. When we stripped out everything we didn't need and we got the exact same layout as you saw a minute ago, the CSS file came to 11.2. In fact, now it's 9.6. We're improving it even better. The fonts, we made sure they choose the fonts, and the fonts would load locally. There's different things you can do. So we reduced font size from 96 to 45. We also cleaned up images, etc. But you see the type of stuff that can happen. So the old website, there's 2 metrics of speed, and speed is often a good measure of environmental behavior. If it's a really slow downloading thing, it's indicating that it's very heavy and it's draining a lot of energy. So on the old website, there are 2 metrics. The first is what's called first contentful paint, which is a weird type of description. But what that means essentially is the first time you see stuff and you can actually start reading stuff. And then the other metric is time to interactive, when you can kind of start using the actual site. So on the old website, it was 5.2 seconds. On the new website, that was 70 kb, is down to 1.3 seconds. So that's in mobile. In desktop, at the old website, it was 1.1 seconds, and now we're down to 0.4 of a second. So this stuff, it's good for customers, it's good for the experience, it's good for everybody on mobile, etc. So all of these behaviors, if you're a designer, stuff like that, it's really good design to do this sort of stuff. It helps consumers, it helps people, etc. But there's loads of stuff we can do in thinking, but we're thinking about weight, and we're thinking about always looking for waste in the process. So that is a quick fire run through of worldwide waste, and now open to discussion and questions.
That was really brilliant, Gerry, and I'm not just saying that because you're Irish. There was so many practical things, and I didn't realize about the website, and you made me feel guilty because I have a website too, and I upload videos of work I've done, and they're all HD files, and they're 6 gigs for one file, and I've got loads of videos up there. So I should check my statistics on my website. And like you said about the crap on the internet, so much of my stuff is crap. So I should check and see the ones that people aren't watching and delete them and just keep the best stuff up there, rather than thinking I have to have an whole archive. And the other thing that hit me before we put it out to questions was so true about transferring data between your devices at home. Sometimes when I have a file and I want to get it from my phone to my computer, and my phone isn't connected to the Wi-Fi, I just send it. But that is going from my phone, the juice it takes to send that signal out to a radio tower. That radio tower, so much energy to get that file, send it back through the phone network, through the Wi-Fi network, and into my laptop, when I could just use AirDrop or cable it in or something. So Gerry, that was fantastic talk, and great to see passion as well. Now, oh look, Sheila's on the move, tuning in from this. She's on a train or a bus or something like that, and isn't it fitting she's going past beautiful trees? We have loads of questions in. One question coming by WhatsApp there. Gerry, what happens, and if you could answer these quickly because we have to move on to the next speaker, okay, to all the 300 billion, the 1,000 worth of laptops every second, all that waste, 54 million tons of e-waste, where does that end up? Is it across Africa?
Well, a lot of it, about half of rich world, the north, the global north, or e-waste we dump in poorer countries, and it ends up with often children in open pit mines. It's an absolute disgrace, the behavior, well, in so many different ways. So a lot of our e-waste is hidden from us. 1,000 laptops every second we dump, is got rid of. So it ends up, a lot of it ends up, so less than 20%, a maximum 20% is recycled. And most of that recycling is really poor recycling. So we do practically nothing, because the tech industry is an industry of planned obsolescence. They want to create as much crap as fast as possible to make the maximum profit.
Yeah, I saw a video on that as well on YouTube of the kids, I forget which African country, and they were melting the computers down to get the copper out.
It's happening all the time. It's happening all the time.
Any questions? Unmute your microphone and tell us where you're from, your name, and ask Gerry a question.
I would like to ask a question. Liz from Austria. I don't know if I should start my video.
Yes, Liz, let us see you and let's hear your question.
My question was about the websites. We have a website that is very dark, so it's very we have a lot of dark colors. Do you have any numbers that show how is the difference if you have dark colors and a white background?
Yeah. Well, there's actually an excellent book called Sustainable Web Design by a guy called Tom Greenwood from a company called Whole Grain Digital, that he actually talks about color, the use of color in web design, and how certain colors have different energy footprints. So I'd highly advise you to have a look at that book. There is impacts depending on the colors that you actually choose. I can't remember exactly what colors have the bigger impacts, but there is definitely certain impacts depending on the color. But look up Sustainable Web Design by Tom Greenwood. He's one of the real pioneers in this space.
That was a great question, Liz. Thank you, Liz, in Austria. And let's go to Jim in Estonia. You've got a question?
Yeah, hi, Colm. Gerry, fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. Love your energy. Speaking of energy, I charge my phone with one of these. It's called a supercharger. Are these well, thumbs up or thumbs down?
I don't know about the supercharger, but at least they're going into a socket, so it's not the Wi-Fi, the thing that you put. That is definitely more energy intensive. From what I read, Jim, I think it's just the same amount of energy in a shorter period of time, but I don't know for sure. That you're getting a lot more energy faster, but if you measured it, over an hour and a half instead of half an hour, as far as I remember, it's not a radical difference, but that would be an interesting thing. I don't know the exact answer to that, but at least wired is more energy efficient for sure. So at least you're working in a wire plugged into a socket. But
I do unplug it when I'm not using it, so that's okay.
Excellent. And another little tip of people thinking, have packs. Have power packs. So you plug a load of things into your power pack. So then you only require one switch at night to switch off a load of things as well. Power packs can be a good way of switching off a load of things at home. It's a habit I've tried to get into.
That's a great idea. We'll take one more question for Gerry before we move on to our next speaker in Germany. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Gerry, that was a fantastic round of applause, everyone, for Gerry McGovern.
Thank you.
Look at that. They're applauding for you all over Europe, Gerry. Thank you so much. And Gerry has a book out too, by the way, the same name as the title of this webinar, Worldwide Waste. And you can get it on his website, gerrymcgovern.com, which is one of the best websites on the internet. Not one of those other ones he was talking about. So, Gerry, thank you so much.
Thank you, Colin.
Now let's go from Ireland to Germany, to Munich, because Rainer, I'm not going to get the second name right, but I'll try it. Crackers. Rainer Crackers. How are you today, Rainer?
Totally fine and well done. I mean, the last name is not that international, as I've already told, so therefore, well done. That's fine.
Thank you.
Doing good. Thanks a lot.
You've been working for Siemens, the huge global corporation there in Germany, for 10 years. And just 8 months ago, you started a new role. So congratulations. You are the sustainability manager. First of all, what does that mean that you're now sustainability manager? And by the way, that's my colleague, Patrick, walking around in the background. So hello, Patrick.
Hello, Patrick. Talking about the role of a sustainability manager, I'm in particular within IT, more or less the translator of the central sustainability strategy of the company as a whole. So the global strategy for all sustainability related topics into IT and transported the other way around then from IT to help. So there's two main factors. One of that is green IT. Parts of that has been already spoken about from Gerry, which is making ourselves more sustainable. And the other part is helping. So this is then the IT for green part, helping the business units, helping our partners to get more green and more sustainable on their side due to digitalization and IoT, for example.
And of course, Siemens is such a huge global company in many different industries. The first things that come to mind are medical and telecommunications and IT. But what is the biggest challenge to Siemens being more sustainable? Where is the most waste?
Well, currently, it's if you're talking about the scopes, it's not scope 1 and scope 2, which is our own emissions and the direct related emissions. It's scope 3 indeed. So the part which is coming in, I mean, all the production, we do have a portfolio of around 250,000 articles, which includes then fire extinguishing systems. It goes to industrial topics. It goes to up to trains. And if you just imagine a train, how it has been produced, there is a lot of material which we are getting provided from our suppliers. So the scope 3 emissions is the biggest portion. And this is the most difficult, therefore, to influence. But on the other side, I think that's the challenge of nowadays and what we're fighting for day to day. And IT is trying to support that, for particular in creating transparency, in helping to get things visible and create awareness.
So what is your challenge, I suppose, this new role that you have? I mean, what are you going to try and do at Siemens?
Well, actually, it's indeed a massive increase of interest in the last 12 months. So since I've started, there is so many more requests now coming from our partners, from different stakeholders, from providers, from partners, which are now requesting to get a transparent view on what they are going to purchase, what they are going to get from Siemens, if it comes not only from a carbon standpoint to CO2, but way more than in regard of any kind of environmental related data. So what we're currently facing is huge challenges to define such kind of data in a scientifically proven way, in a reliable way, which we then are able to display. One of the biggest challenges is to find some partners which make that numbers comparable, because there is not that many companies on the market currently which are able to certify such numbers. So it's always a matter of comparing apples and oranges sometimes. If then there is competitors coming up with a number for more or less the same type of a product, which then is then just starting to get into discussions on our side. Well, what is then IT and what can we help them? But this is indeed one of the biggest challenges of nowadays, which we are facing, beside the topic of awareness and transparency.
And so is that when the consumer, the clients that you're working with are asking these questions? Let's take, for example, I think I was watching a video on YouTube the other night about CT scanners in hospitals. Don't ask me why I was watching it and how they work, but it was a Siemens manufactured machine. So if a hospital come to you, are they concerned in how environmentally friendly the product is, or how environmentally friendly the process in which it was produced in is?
Very much, yeah, differs from customer to customer. Currently, it's a small amount which is very much interested in all the details and into production then as well. Most of it, it's just a basic understanding of what is the current carbon footprint which comes along with it. I mean, carbon emissions, I think that is getting more and more prominent. If you just look at consumer markets, there is, I don't know, hemp's milk, which is coming with a carbon label on it, and there is a certain amount of I don't know, other consumer products which you can see. In electronics, for example, one of the first brands is Logitech, which is not displaying it on all their products. I think this is getting more and more common, and that's indeed then the topic of what the basic questions come along with. What is the carbon emission of the product which I'm now purchasing? But I think on a long run, and we're not talking about, I think, 10 years, it's getting quicker and quicker that the interest is raising more and more, as said, into more environmental related topics, which is then repairability, which is recyclability. So topics Gerry mentioned as well. So people are interested in that and trying to get more about it, up to then, even the more invisible parts, which is then human rights, for example, if it comes to raw material production, if it comes to all the consumable products which are part of that, which is then coming from, as said, scope 3 downstream or upstream emissions. So this is, I think, getting more and more prominent and not only related to carbon anymore.
We talked about this before, Rainer, at the World Cleanup Day, about whose responsibility was it? Was it the company to lead the way in terms of being more environmentally conscious and create products that have a lower CO2 footprint? Or was it the consumers that had to really push the companies, because the companies would say, well, look, people are still buying the products, and at the end of the day, they want the cheapest thing they can get that's the most effective. So do you find that, let's say with Siemens, that it has been the push of the consumer that has driven them to want to make a change?
Well, I now have to be very cautious in how I answer that, because there is a political part in it. So there is, without any doubt, a push from the outside. So, I mean, Fridays for Future made its move for us in Siemens as well. And this is, without any doubt, a good part of the reason why you're putting it. And another one is then investors. I mean, there is more and more investors showing their interest in the company, which is in the long run taking care on sustainability topics. But that wouldn't be fair to put it on that stage. So in particular, certain amount of topics which Siemens is taking care of is, since the history of Siemens, since we started to work as a company, and in particular human rights, for example, we do have a very straightforward concern in regard of our partners, which we're working together with. There's guiding principles, which is fulfilled since more than 20 years already. And the whole topic of carbon and CO2 related emissions is not only since now. I think the strategy to be a carbon neutral company by 2030 in own operations, which is the case for Siemens, has been, I think, published in 2012. So this is already about 10 years or 9 years back then. So this is, I would come back to the part of your question now. Is it the responsibility of the consumer, customer? Is it the responsibility of the company? I think it's both. I think we do have, as a company with that big famous brand, a huge influence, and what we can make is trying to help others, help our suppliers, help our partners to get more sustainable together then with us. But on the other side, just create awareness then to not only the consumers. I mean, we do have within Siemens around 300,000 people working for Siemens worldwide. And this is a huge amount of people which we can influence just with what we do. So the sustainability related part is influencing them, their families, their surroundings, maybe the whole community around it. And this is a big portion of influence which we can take as well, and which I take serious and which motivates me, to be honest, on a day-to-day basis.
We'll come to questions in a moment, so if anyone has a question, be ready to ask it in just a moment. But we heard Gerry talk about, Rainer, the huge amount of e-waste dumped in mainly third world countries. A lot of Siemens electronics products. What do Siemens do to try and ensure that the products that they're sending out are not going to end up in those third world countries in a landfill or being burnt by people trying to take out copper in 10 years' time?
So this is, to be honest, one of the first topics I've started with in my new role, and which is still pushing me on a daily basis. So the whole topic of refurbishment, talking at the end of the usage, but as well at the beginning of it. So what we're trying to do is influence the whole product purchasement story and the whole portfolio which is being provided in regard of electronics, to make them the more sustainable and the most sustainable which is possible. On the other side, the refurbishment is a huge topic which we are globally rolling out currently within Siemens, to ensure that we're not only taking care on the usage, which is expanded. So exactly the examples of Gerry, which is currently around 4 years of usage within Siemens. So that's the average for most of the electronic products. But afterwards, we are trying to ensure that most of the components are being refurbed together with social partners. So one of the biggest ones, I think it's the most biggest IT social companies for refurbishment in Europe, AFB. So company which is not only taking care on refurbishment and recycling of equipment, but then helping people with disabilities as well. So the disability rate is about 50% of people working for them. And this is our biggest partner, taking care on around 30,000 products each year within Europe, which has then a refurbishment rate of 80%. And we're trying to even increase that further and just roll it out globally. So to be fair and frank, there is certainly countries in which this is a topic not really very much taken care of currently, but what my responsibility is including as well is exactly this, to ensure that we are, as a company, going in a very good way forward to make sure that this is not happening any further. So I do have kids on my own, 3 of them, and always if I see such kind of videos, and as you just already mentioned it in YouTube, and I think in the comments there was one of the comments about this as well, this is annoying. And if you see that, that's so sad that it just pushes me on a day-to-day basis to exactly take care on that, very honest and very serious, to ensure that this is at least not happening if we can avoid it.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it hits home obviously when you have kids of your own. Would anyone like to ask Rainer a question there in his beautiful, spacious, minimalist room in Munich in Germany? Unmute your microphone, tell us your name and where you're from. Don't be shy, friends. Now, let's see here. Who's going to have a killer question for...
The killer question to the clean room.
Now, let's
Not
see
as clean
here.
as yours, by the way.
This room is pretty clean here too. It's all been blessed by the Pope and everything, so it's nice and holy. Pope's blessing to you all. I'm in the Vatican, by the way, if anyone missed the start of the presentation and wondering what the heck am I talking about. Now, I see there was some more questions coming in there on the side as well. Let me have a look at some of them here. Yeah, is there an area, and because I want to be conscious that we do this sometimes at the World Cleanup Day, we can focus on companies and put blame on them. Obviously Siemens is a huge company, but they're just one part of the global capitalist structure that we have, a disposable culture that we have. So is there something that you think Siemens does really well? Is there a product or an industry that you're involved in where you think you've done such great work in keeping CO2 emissions down, like a success story that you like to mention?
Yeah, currently not in my own responsibility in the IT surrounding, but I think what is indeed one of the most prominent ones is the trains. I mean, and Siemens is one of the biggest train inventors in the world, and the electric trains as an example, which is helping them to get from A to B without putting too much energy into it. I think that is one of the best examples how transport could look like. And if you look back in the history of Siemens, there is many more examples of electrified transport. I think already, 50 years or even more years back, there was an electric car which was developed by Siemens, but obviously way too early. We should have waited.
Well, let's go live to a reporter who is on a train, Sheila Rose in Estonia. Good to talk to you. How are you, Sheila? Unmute your microphone. I saw you fixing your hair a second ago, so now you're ready. Are you on a train, Sheila, or are you on a bus?
I'm on a bus.
Oh, you're on a bus. Okay. Do you want to pretend you're on a train for a second?
I would love to.
There's a lot of people, so we won't embarrass you. Oh, look, there's all the people on the bus. God, there is a lot of people on that bus. Where are you going, Sheila?
I'm going to my hometown.
Okay, well,
Estonia.
have a safe trip, and thank you so much. I thought you were on a train, and that's why I was hoping it could be a Siemens electric train.
I would love to be.
Well, that looks like a nice journey too with the trees. Thank you. Have a safe journey.
Thank
One
you.
thing I want to ask you, Rainer, before we move on to our next speaker, is that you are going to be involved in a digital cleanup on Earth Day, I believe. This will be across Siemens. What is the goal and what's the aim?
Yeah, correct. So Siemens will participate in the World Cleanup Day, and we will start on Earth Day indeed. Make transparent what is going to happen if everybody within Siemens, as mentioned, around 300,000 people worldwide, is being made aware with a big campaign, which we are starting to kick off currently, to delete the old unused data. I mean, the examples of Gerry, I can just go on with that in Siemens as well. There is many colleagues I know which are storing their emails since the beginning of their work period, which is mostly then 15 or 20 years. And I know that the handling of data, nobody takes care of. I mean, the whole topic is a mindset thing. And I think waste, e-waste, this is all getting together into one direction. If you're not aware of what you're doing and what the outcome is, then you don't mind. And that's exactly what we are trying to do, make things transparent, show in big dashboards what is the current amount, and find equivalence, which is then explaining it in an understandable way. I mean, that's always the disadvantage. People like us who are interested in that, they do have a feeling of what 50 kilograms of carbon or 500 kilograms of carbon means. But I would say most of our partners and colleagues around us don't even know about it and don't have a feeling of what is the difference between 50 or 500. And that's exactly the idea and the mindset which we are fulfilling, to put equivalence into it in a positive mood. So we are putting the amount of trees which is required to offset and to compensate, such as Gerry did in his presentation, and then hopefully after then 24 hours, which we are running with that, following the sun, due to our global setup of Siemens sites, we are then hopefully showing at the end of that period of how much carbon we've able to be reduced by just deleting unused data.
Rainer, that is fantastic. Before we move on to Virginie, I think Virginie has a question. She has her hand up there on the Zoom. Unmute yourself, Virginie. What is your question or comment for Rainer?
Hello, Rainer. Siemens is a very big company, but I think that you have also many companies that you are working with. I think. I mean, to
True.
produce everything, you're not working on your own. You have to work with all. How do you work? How do you manage to give the idea to other company you're working with to be more sustainable? Do you act also in this way? Because it's very important to have everyone around you and all the people you are working with committed in this action.
And thank you much for that question, Virginia. That's one of the biggest influences we can take due to the fact that we are a huge company with a big brand, and therefore able to influence suppliers and partners, which we are currently working with. So in particular, for my area of responsibility, it's mostly cloud providers like AWS, like Google, like Azure, and all of the other ones, as we do have around 80% of our IT services in cloud surroundings. So what we are currently doing is putting, for example, then contractual regulations into the supply contracts, which we're fulfilling with them. So they have to show up their strategy. They have to commit then to our goals as well, that we're just going together into that direction. So it wouldn't make any kind of sense if we just put ourselves into a net zero carbon emissions by scope 1 and by scope 2 and just ignore scope 3 parts. And that's exactly what we're currently doing to influence them. Same thing happening on all the hardware parts. So everything what is being purchased is being requested. So the big providers, the big manufacturers of equipment are being pushed into this, and we're creating the most sustainable products as the portfolio of the future. So currently what I'm working on is making things transparent and putting a bit of finger in the wound. So as soon as there is any kind of provider coming up with no answer to specific questions, then they're going to be questioned. And this is getting them more or less same importance than prices. So in the back, it was mostly just about the price discussions. It was mostly the cheapest offer which has been taken. In the meantime, we're putting sustainability on the same level to discuss it in the same amount, in the same surrounding.
That's great. Thank you so much. Rainer, very, very quickly, before we move on to Virginia in France, a question on the chat. Has Siemens any projects in the realm of redundant, obsolete and trivial data, and how to remove it? So with all the data that your company accumulates in cyberspace, like Gerry talked about, all the emails going across the corporation that is obsolete emails, never used, is there any plan to clean up some of that e-waste? The digital waste?
Well, there is a plan. We do have, unfortunately, no mechanisms currently in place to make that things happen in an automated way. I think that's the key. The key will be to have some kind of automatism, some intelligence, which is then taking care of that. Because what we just see is the user itself, and I call it in particular a user in that case, is not taking care of it, mostly because of unawareness and because of way too many things to do. So I don't get through my emails, I don't get through my data and just scroll them through, which is used, which is unused, and start deleting it. It's way too complicated currently, because most of the companies don't have an interest in getting rid of those data because they make their money out of. So what we're currently trying to do is finding indeed intelligent mechanisms to do so. On the other side, and to be fair here as well, I mean, IoT, for example, is creating way more data in the future. So all the digitalization of products, if you just look at what a train, for example, is producing of amount of data, which has been used then for a very good reason to really have a maintenance prediction made and reduce the amount of kilometers driven by a train to certain areas to get maintained. Then this is helping on one hand, but creating another amount of data on the other hand. So this is indeed an area which we have to further proceed and further optimize them.
Before we let you go, Rainer, I just minimized this and I checked my Gmail account, and I have all my emails there, but no big files, because the big files are sent through WeTransfer or whatever. So just small emails of text, maybe some attachments. And I'm looking down at the bottom. This is really interesting, everyone. If you go to the bottom of your Gmail, it will tell you how much space your Gmail account is taking up. Guess how many gigabytes, Rainer, my email is taking up, my Gmail?
Very good question. 3?
520 gigabytes.
Oh my gosh.
520 gigabytes of just emails I have. That is unbelievable. Okay, I got some cleaning up to do. Rainer, thank you very much. Round of applause for Rainer, everybody. Woo! And to our reporter.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you to Siemens as well. And we're going to move on swiftly now. We went from Ireland to Germany, and now we're going to France. This is like the Eurovision Song Contest. Virginie Guerin. Virginie, how are you?
I'm fine. The song today I want to sing is No.
Let me see if I can remember a good French Eurovision song. France Gall. Poppy de Son.
Yes.
It's a beautiful one from 1960 something. Poppy de Sing, Poppy de Son.
It might be Je suis une poupée de cire, une poupée de son.
Thank you. Okay, goodbye. That's it, everyone. We're finished. Now, we're going to talk about the digital cleanup that happened in France. When did it happen and how did it go?
It happened from 15th of March until 20th of March. For companies, for citizens, for schools and municipalities. Lots of people committed here, so it ran very well. We were very happy. We don't have yet all the results. We will deliver the results on Thursday, the next 22 of April. So it was very nice. We had a full team committed from World Cleanup Day France and also from Institut du Numérique Responsable, which means the Institute of Green IT, we would say, or Sustainable IT. So they have the experts in the field of green IT, and we have the expert of mobilization here in World Cleanup Day France. So all together, we build a full toolkits for everyone to make it possible. So I can advise you to go in our website so that you can find how to clean your Gmail column.
I really need to do that. And what did you encourage people to do when you were telling them to clear up their digital waste? I mean, I've just realized that I've got to tackle my Gmail. Where did you tell them to look? Where online?
We organized a very practical toolkit. So you had one to clean your social media, one to clean your computer, another one to clean your smartphone, another one to clean your box mail. And from that, the way was to say to people, you can do it. It's very easy. You don't need to be an expert like Gerry McGovern to do it properly. Everyone can do it. And moreover, what is behind is that you will keep your materials, your computer, your smartphones longer. And that's the main issue. actually. So, and one of the topics that was not really, I think, showed here is that the people feel more comfortable when they clean their Gmail and they clean their smartphones because they feel lighter at the end.
Yeah,
It's
when you
personal
clear up your
ecology
desktop-
also.
Yeah, you do. You feel the psychology of it. When you clear your desktop, I know people will agree with this, you feel lighter. And you know what I was thinking there, Virginia, when you were speaking about the digital cleanup? When I looked at my Gmail, 500 gigabytes. When Gerry mentioned about the website, and on my website, there are gigabytes of video footage. On my YouTube account, all the videos I've uploaded, it would fill a number of these because all the videos I have on my website, a lot of them are on here. So just think, I would have a few of these somewhere in a warehouse, somewhere in the world. There are a number of these with fans cooling them just with my data on them, storing that data for me. And they're being cooled 24/7 and powered so I can access it at any time. When you visualize it, it's absolutely crazy, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And the people, the thing is that there is, I don't know who was the person who created the name cloud. But it's true, it's very good marketer because the people are thinking that it is the cloud, and the cloud is not materially, it's just hair. So there is something very strange with this because the people say, oh, it's in the cloud, so it's okay. But it's not virtual, it's real. And that's what we did with this digital cleanup in France, and we had lots of people that reacted to our digital cleanup because we say to people, just erase emails, just erase pictures, just think about the way you are taking pictures with your camera. You don't need such a high resolution, actually, because you send it just for the social media, for example. And we had the experts from the IT coming saying, but the problem is not that, it's better to work on materials because it's really the devices that are very costing environmentally. And we say that it's the very first thing that we can do, but it's a way to be aware and to do the job, to begin somewhere.
Virginie, we're nearly out of time. Does anyone have a question they would like to ask Virginie? Raise your hand or unmute your microphone and tell us your name and where you're from about how they achieved such a great digital cleanup in France. Yes, sir. We have someone unmuted the microphone. Mr. Clinton.
Hey.
He changed his mind and he muted his microphone again. Bill Clinton, thank you for joining us today.
Gerry say a comment on the chat. He said the cloud is on the ground.
That is such a good point. The cloud is on the ground. And you made a great point, Virginia. It is genius marketing because the cloud, you think that this is completely light and environmentally friendly.
I would like to talk to this guy who invents this term of cloud and to say that, and what do you do now to change it?
That's a fantastic initiative, Virginia. Congratulations.
Thank you, Gerry. I'm happy.
Gerry, I don't know, just before we wrap up, if you know anything about this, but I saw a documentary a week ago on Vice News about cryptocurrency.
Oh, and horrible.
And this cryptocurrency, we think is just...
It's a scam. It's one of the worst things that has happened in the last 20... I mean, it's a scam.
But the way Bitcoin is created, I didn't realize that they have to have servers running to find and mine Bitcoin.
It creates more, energy to mine $1 of Bitcoin than to mine $1 of gold.
Wow!
It's going to get a lot worse. It's a total scam. It's one of the worst things that has happened.
I have to point out, as a journalist, I'm drilled into me. Whenever we say scam, we always say it's not. We don't know if it's a scam. No. The currency itself is not a scam, but what you're saying is that it is a shambles. The energy that it takes.
No, the whole model is totally anti-earth. I mean, it's the more valuable Bitcoin will become, the more energy it will consume. So its whole mathematical model is to destroy the earth. It is one of the most crazy things I've ever seen in my entire life from a negative point of view for the environment.
And this documentary showed in New Zealand, they were building these huge warehouses. They couldn't keep up with the demand, and they were filled with servers just running, and they were mining Bitcoin.
They claim, oh, it's renewable energy, but this energy could be used for more productive things like childcare centers or something good, instead of these geeks trying to rip the world off by snake oil sales.
Now, by the way, just to mention, Gerry has a lot to say, as you can tell. And Gerry has a 3-hour course about digital waste. It will be on Earth Day, the 22nd of April. The registration starts tomorrow, and information is on the World Cleanup Day Facebook page. So if you want to be involved in that, you really do learn a lot listening to Gerry. So go to the World Cleanup Day Facebook page. From tomorrow, registration starts for his 3-hour course on the 22nd of April. Before we go, do we have any last questions for Virginie or for any of our speakers today? Unmute your microphone, or if there's a point you'd like to make, and tell us where you're from. I'll do some elevator music while we wait for some questions to come in. I'll do some Eurovision French music. If you don't, I'm going to put you on the spot. Let's go to Nima. Nima, how are you, my friend?
Hello, how are you?
Whereabouts? You're in Iran.
How are you, everybody? Sorry, you're breaking up. It's a bad connection.
Oh, I was just saying you're in Iran. Is that right?
Yeah, everything is good. Thank you so much.
You enjoyed the talk today?
It's getting very hot, very warm. Yeah. It was very informative meeting. Thank you so much. Thank you, all the speakers.
Thank you.
Great, Nima. Thank you very much for that in Iran, and good to see you again. Who else have we got here?
Good to see you too.
You too. Ingrid, I know, is doing her tax returns, and she's half listening to us and half working. Ingrid, are you there? Ingrid Nielsen?
Yes, I am here, Colin. And it was such an interesting webinar that I did not do my tax return.
Are you doing some creative accounting, Ingrid? Or what, are they like above board tax returns, or are you kind of like,
No, I'm law abiding.
Okay, good to hear. Ingrid, thank you so much. Let's say Anna Grill. Anna is out putting some burgers on the grill. Anna Grill, how are you? I give her 4 seconds to respond. She's not there. Listen, thank you so much. I just wanted to say hi to a few people before we wrap up. Thank you so much to all our speakers, to Gerry and to Rainer and to Virginie. A round of applause to them all. The hands in the air. And thank you so much. I'm off to tackle my Gmail and delete 500 gigabytes of useless emails. I hope you do the same.
I'm watching you, Colm. I'm waiting for your results.
I have to post. I'm going to have to post the before and after to prove that I did it.
Good man.
But it's awful. Listen, okay. Thank you so much, everyone, guys. Thank you for taking part. Thanks to Let's Do It World for organizing this, to Heidi and to Annalie and to the whole team.
Thanks.
And
yeah.
we will, and to Frastamo as well. And we will talk to you again soon. Everyone, thank you. And God bless.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Have a nice weekend.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.